Hooty hoo! We're bringing Master P from the other side.
Gentlemen, let's broaden our minds.
Are they in the proper approach pattern for today?
Negative.
Hold the weapons! Now! Charge the lightning field.
Okay. You're the financier of a small comic book distribution company. It was just revealed that you've been propping up multiple publishers who you distribute, and things look pretty shady. What do you do, Hotshot? Lean in. This is the tale of Scott Mitchell Rosenberg, Hollywood, an obscure Italian comic book, and how our system is bullshit. This is the story of Cowboys and Aliens. Welcome to the Dispatch Ajax podcast. I'm Skip.
I'm Jake.
Uh-huh. Today, we're here to discuss the biggest scam in comic book history that you've probably never heard of. So, let's dive right in.
Yes, let's.
Aircel was a Canadian industrial manufacturer who specialized in foam insulation. When they lost their government...
What?
Mm-hmm.
What are we...
Yes, listen, just
Okay.
buckle up, sunshine.
Sometimes you just gotta sit down, shut up, and take your meds.
So you gotta lay back and think of England. So when they lost their government contract, they took the next logical step and started publishing comic books.
Huh.
They went from being Aircel Industrial to Aircel Comics or Aircel Publishing. That's why they have a weird name. Aircel was the name of their foam insulation manufacturing company.
That makes much more sense now. The air is keeping them celibate.
Exactly. So Aircel Comics, or Aircel Publishing, was founded by a man named Barry Blair. Sounds like he's Gary Glitter's rival. And they're based in Ottawa, Canada. And it was founded in 1985. Now, Blair ran the publishing operations, and Aircel's initial talent lineup included him, Dave Cooper, Patrick McCown, and Guang Yap. And the only reason I list those is because later on, you'd be surprised at some of the guys that came out of this whole chain of things, including Dale Keown.
It's, I think, the one person of that list that I knew.
Well, yes, I know. Dave. I've heard of Dave Cooper, but that's also probably a common name. So
I think that just because he changed his name to Dave after he was DB when he jumped out of the plane.
See, I was thinking he changed his name from Dale.
I see where you're going there.
He went into his own witness protection program.
Canada does have a fine cup of coffee.
Damn good pie. So, Aircel released its first books in 1985. Some of the titles include Samurai, Dragon Ring, one word, odd, and Elf Lord, also one word.
Why couldn't they just have made one title? Samurai, Dragon Ring, Elf Lord.
Samurai, Dragon Ring Elf Lord.
Yes, I'd read that.
Actually, that sounds pretty badass, really. In the late 1980s, the independent comics world contracted, and that's being generous. It kind of crashed. And it hurt publishers such as Aircel. As the industry lurched toward the coming comic apocalypse of the 1990s, smaller publishers like Aircel, Eternity Comics, Wonder Color Comics, Imperial Comics needed help to stay afloat. Enter Malibu Comics.
Hey, all right, hang 10, man.
So, Malibu Comics was launched in 1986 by Dave Ulbrich and Tom Mason, joined later by Chris Ulm in 1987. Malibu began with creator-owned titles, but made a name for itself publishing a combination of news series and licensed properties. At Malibu, Ulbrich created the plan for the Ultraverse imprint, which will come into play later. Now, a man named Scott Mitchell Rosenberg owned a distribution company called Sunrise, who offered to finance Malibu in its infancy. Malibu's 1987 financial agreement with Rosenberg led to it acquiring Aircel. Malibu had struck a deal down the chain because they were hard up for money. They said that if Aircel loaned its publishing label to Malibu, they literally leased it from the company Aircel to publish specific types of comics because they wanted to do like a DC Vertigo thing.
Gotcha.
And Malibu, while doing that, didn't tell Aircel that they themselves were hard up, and they were taking money from Scott Mitchell Rosenberg. In April 1987, the Comics Journal revealed that Eternity had been financed, along with Amazing Comics, Wonder Color Comics, and Imperial Comics by Rosenberg. After this was made public, Rosenberg discontinued almost all of them, except for Eternity.
Well, that makes sense, because, I mean, it's going to go on forever, so...
Well, yeah, I mean, it's got staying power. It's evergreen. So Eternity and Aircel became the two sub-imprints of Malibu. In 1989, Malibu acquired the publisher Adventure Publications, and from that point forward, the Malibu brand was used for superhero titles, while Eternity was used for the magazine line, also for manga like Robotech, and Adventure was used for Malibu's licensed titles such as Planet of the Apes and Alien Nation, where you get
Ape Nation.
that's why that crossover happens.
Well, it's all worth it then. The whole thing is
and
so worth it.
Aircel was used for Barry Blair's comics and Malibu's adult line. I didn't dig too deep into what that means, but we've got an idea. So in 1990, Aircel released a limited 3-issue series called Men in Black. Maybe you've heard of it.
Sounds vaguely familiar.
I'm sure it's from an X-Files episode. It was the adventures of Jesse the Body Ventura and Alex Trebek. It was like another 48 hours. Not 48 hours, another 48.
Another 48 hours.
48 hours later.
Look who's copping now.
They're baby cops that speak.
And I just think like these baby cops, and it's Jesse Ventura's voice and Alex Trebek.
They both have mustaches, famously.
What you got here is,
It's okay.
Oh, I had to take a drink.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, blame the booze. It's a poor craftsman who blames his tools.
Is that true? Is that a fact?
It is a fact. Just ask Jesus. He's a carpenter.
So is John.
So is Harrison Ford. And I'm just saying, we've never seen the three of them in the same room at the same time.
Murder, kill, all the carpenters.
Name 3 people who've never been in my kitchen. So, I'm pretty sure that Men in Black was actually in the works before the Malibu acquisition. They bought Aircel in 1989. Men in Black was released in 90, but it didn't really fit Malibu's thing. And then Malibu immediately ordered a sequel, even though I don't think it was intended on one. So an additional 3 issues in 91. And the weird thing is, one of the weird things, but this becomes a pattern, is that the entire Men in Black, zeitgeist only occurred because of 3 comic book issues, 3 indie black and white comic book issues.
When is that good, my friend?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about, comics, several movies, an animated TV show, video games, toys,
lunchboxes.
Slapped it on a plastic lunchbox. Men in Black finds a way.
Men in Black condoms. Men in Black dental dams.
I like Delta dams because I want to know what that is.
That's a dam to keep out all Delta Burks.
Oh, well, that's possible. I was thinking it starred Chuck Norris, but I don't.
That's an Omega dam.
Oh, it was the Octodam.
Octodam.
By the early 1990s, Malibu had established itself as a dependable company. During this time, some creators, the likes of Eric Larson,
heard of him,
Rob Liefeld,
know him,
and Jim Valentino, they had dinner with Ulbricht, who expressed interest in publishing comics created by them because they were very popular at Marvel, and they were growing frustrated with the company's policies and practices, which they felt did not sufficiently reward the talent. And we will probably do a whole episode or a series on this. The defection of image and the corrosion of the comics industry by toppling the monopolies.
Ooh,
it's a weird tale.
Yeah, pluses, minuses, a lot of ins, a lot of outs, a lot of what have yous.
Look, I'm looking at some new information, man. So we'll get into that later. But basically, they came up with a new character or a new team or shtick or whatever. It was basically stolen by the publisher, either Marvel or DC, and the people that did it, no matter how many issues were sold, were given basically a box of Count Chocula in compensation.
Which shows up even more now as everything is getting made into movies and video games. And, I mean, the most these creators are getting are a thank you in the credits.
Yep.
While, Marvel and Disney, they just rake up all the funds.
Yep. I mean, Jim Starlin got what out of Infinity War? A good game champ?
Yeah, essentially. I mean, it makes sense why everyone wanted to, go off and create their own things that they could own, that they could have, that they could do anything they wanted with.
And you know what happened with that? It was a complete disaster.
Sometimes you fly a little too high, a little too close to the sun.
On wings of pastrami.
Soup.
We'll get into that. That would be a really good series for us to do. We'll get into that later. So, by early 1992, a group of 8 creators, including Larson, Liefeld, Valentino, and others, announced the founding of Image Comics. The initial titles were produced under the Image imprint, but published through Malibu, which provided the oversight, including production, distribution, and marketing. The same year, Malibu sold Men in Black as a film prospect to producers Walter F. Parks and Laurie McDonald. Within a few months, the Image title success led to Malibu having almost 10% of the American comics market share, which exceeded DC Comics. There were a lot more companies, and DC was on a downslope.
Really? It was that much?
It was that much.
Huh.
People just were not reading DC. That's why they started doing all that extreme crap, trying to copy Image during that period. That's when you see the life and the death of Superman and all that. That's when they started to climb back into the limelight. But during that period, late 80s, early 90s, nobody was reading DC Comics. You know what? And it's funny too, because Marvel at that point was near bankruptcy.
Yeah, I mean, the comic industry was failing as a whole. Again, this is not an easy one-to-one. It's a complicated matter. But...
It is. That's why we should get into it. A different series. But anyway, I brought it up because I'm going to go away from the Image stuff now. But by the beginning of 1993, Image's financial situation was secure enough to publish its titles independently, and it left Malibu. And then it just fluttered off into the sunset. As sales declined industry-wide in the mid-1990s, the reasons for which we will discuss later, Malibu canceled lower-selling series. But their biggest problem was that they had started a video game division, which sucked up most of their capital. In fact, to break into the video game industry cost them $200,000 a month.
Oh my lord.
Yeah. But still, the company's assets were seen as good enough to garner interest from DC itself by the spring of 1994. They were considering acquiring them to add to their catalog to boost their market share. Now, because Malibu had a big enough market share that DC was even considering the possibility and would help them push past Marvel, Marvel decided to go behind DC's back and buy Malibu themselves.
This is such carny BS.
It is ridiculous. So it's like robber baron shit from the 1850s to 1900, it's ridiculous. So they had a popular line of characters and storylines in their Ultraverse series under Malibu, which was their superhero universe specifically.
None of being good, mind you.
No, they were all bad. Prime, it had Brayfogle, who's a great artist, and it had Barry Windsor Smith did Rune, which, that was whatever.
Lots of whatever.
Lots of whatevers. It did have a loyal fan base. They had a big chunk of the market share. I remember I had all of that stuff. I even had, Jim Shooter's Plasm or whatever that shit was.
The Warriors of Plasm.
So to slow down rumors that the Ultraverse titles would be canceled as soon as the deal closed, Malibu claimed that Marvel wanted them not for their market share or their intellectual properties, but because of their digital coloring system. They were the first people to start using Photoshop to color comic books.
Yeah. Which completely changed comics ever since.
Yes, that is true. However, that is not the real reason this happened.
Okay.
So we're seeing signs. In addition, Rosenberg and Malibu signed with the William Morris Agency.
Those are the most trustworthy guys around.
And they're Hollywood guys, too, so big red flag. The company was purchased by Marvel Comics on November 3rd, 1994. In the middle of the next year, Ulbricht, along with the original Malibu guys, including Mason and Ulm, all left the company. I'm guessing they were squeezed out. Because what was their role? In September 1995, Marvel canceled the entire Ultraverse line. During an event called Black September. Red flag. Another red flag. I'm throwing the flag right now. If you're called Black September, I don't think there's any doubt as to what's the fate of your line. The Black September event canceled a bunch of titles and then relaunched a handful of some of their more popular titles as a new wave of crossovers with Marvel characters. So they didn't even have their own books anymore. They had only crossovers.
Right.
So this initial move was foreseen by popular franchises and characters from the Avengers guest starring in their books. The Volume 2 series, which started with number Infinity issues, the now modified Ultraverse lasted less than a year and a half before the changes proved unpopular. Marvel was obviously just doing lip service to the whatever fans they tried to drag along. Various series were then canceled again, and a short time later, in 1996, they were all gone. The last books were Prime, Rune, Hearts of Darkness, and Ultraforce. They lasted until December 1996. The last comic produced in the Ultraverse line was Ultraverse Future Shock, a one-shot that attempted to wrap up the plot lines of Ultraverse. So they did a one-off, whatever Dexter's trying to do.
Well, at least they tried to wrap up. Not just leave you hanging.
Sure. So Marvel did a capitalism and bought up their potential competitor, then slew them, solidifying their share of the market. Truly the land of opportunity.
I mean, that's just how
I don't
Stan
think Stan
rolls.
was involved at any point in Marvel at this point. I don't think he was in the room.
No. It's the
House of
idea
Ideas.
of Stan is like this all benevolent, creator that everything flows out of, but he's really just stealing ideas and money from everybody
What an
and
amazing
shutting people out.
parallel to the person we're talking about today. Well done. Men in Black, the series, has been adapted across the wide variety of media, spawning an entire sci-fi comedy franchise. It proved a huge box office success for Columbia Pictures and Amblin Entertainment, resulting in now 3 sequels, comic tie-ins, and an animated series that lasted between October 97 and June 2001. And it was actually good. Of course, there are novelizations, soundtracks, video games, and an amusement park ride. All off of 3 issues of a comic book.
It's amazing when you think about it, but, I mean, there are humbler beginnings for other things.
Sure, but most of those have at least sort of more, wholesome beginnings, genuine effort.
Maybe we just think they do.
Well, maybe. That's very possible. I mean, we've learned a little bit about the behind the scenes of Star Wars and Flash Gordon and all that. And, of course, Jodorowsky's Dune. So, yeah, I mean, that's very possible. So now Rosenberg thinks he's hot shit. He successfully sold out to Marvel. I wouldn't have been surprised had he sold his distribution company to Diamond, actually. But in reality, Sunrise began to suffer a cash flow problem in 87 because of the industry folding, and it abruptly closed its doors in 1988.
Diamond is also retail distributors. Yeah, and they distribute all comic books and comic book related materials to North America. Well, until recently. That's a whole nother issue that we don't really need to get into. For years and years, for decades, they were your one-stop go-to shop for everything you needed comic-wise.
They were the monopoly. They were Edison. They were Boss Pendergast. They were,
They were the Monopoly Man.
Which is based on a real guy I found out recently.
Oh, really?
What they called the black and white implosion of indie comics forced a lot out of business. A lot of small publishers had no cash flow to continue, and they all went under. Now, Rosenberg had just sold Malibu to Marvel and had formed Platinum Studios. So he's already setting himself up in Hollywood. And he was just flush with cash. So, alongside Irvin Rustomagic, founder of Strip Art Features in Sarajevo,
Okay.
he teamed up with that guy because he had gotten a hold of the rights of several obscure intellectual properties from the European market, which included the rights to an Italian Western comic book called Tex. It was just a Western, but a good one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. The reason they managed to get their hands on these kind of properties was because they were unpopular as potential properties that would turn into movies. The industry wasn't doing Westerns then. You had, Unforgiven and maybe The Quick and the Dead, but, that's it.
Yeah, Westerns were dead, especially in comic books.
And who was going to go to a movie based on a comic book that's a Western?
Movies based on comic books weren't even a thing at the time.
Well, Men in Black had just been a huge hit.
We're talking 97?
Yeah,
right.
And you had just seen The Phantom and The Shadow, and Batman movies were still kicking ass at that point. And
well, I'm just saying, it's not everything that's coming out of Hollywood right now is based off of comic book, but it wasn't a one-to-one, this will work as it is now.
No, this is what started it. But we're a year away from Blade.
Mm-hmm. That's
because it's not the MCU.
It's certainly not the MCU. I think the success of Blade then led into your X-Men's and your Spider-Mans, which then led into
your Punishers.
Skipping over that, which then led into Iron Man, Thor, Avengers, etc. The MCU we have now.
A man named Greg Novak was hired by Rosenberg and Company. He later went on to work for DC and then joined Sci-Fi Films. So he's responsible for a bunch of sci-fi originals when that was a great, amazing joke.
The best of the best.
Right. Pop it, Tommy. Papa, give me a movie.
No, not that good, best of the best.
So they needed a hook to pitch this as a movie. So he suggested a title, Cowboys and Aliens. And then he was asked to work it up as a one-sheet. So with a man named Paul Benjamin, the two created 5 drawings and a bunch of character designs and details. With William Morris representing him, they managed to land a cover image in Variety. And that's the famous poster. It's also the cover of the book we'll talk about. I had that poster. I got it through a comic book store when they were pushing it. The big PR putsch. It's just the image of a cowboy on his horse, a spaceship overhead. He's turned around and he's shooting at it. It's iconic because that's really the only image people had for 11 years of this. And I wish I was exaggerating, but it's true. So the story in the magazine reported that this was an upcoming comic turning into a movie. But there was one tiny problem. There was no comic. It didn't exist. And I don't think Rosenberg had any intention on making one. Instead of just straight up pitching this as an idea for a movie, he was dead set on pitching it as a comic book property that already existed, or was going to exist soon, and then flipping that idea into a movie. Not only was that ass backwards and disingenuous, but it's shady as hell. Either way, because of William Morris, Universal/DreamWorks, Fox Family Films, Columbia, Disney, and Paramount were all interested. The Warner Brothers passed because they were vomiting out Wild Wild West at the time, based on notes from Kevin Smith's Superman.
Who doesn't love a giant mechanical spider?
Oh, we're going to have to get into that, too, at some point.
Can we not?
Oh, come on, we're
Please?
going to have to. We have to. Whatever. We'll discuss that later. Mom and Dad are fighting. Rosenberg was painted into a corner and finally decided to publish a, quote, graphic novel. Now, graphic novels are very specific things that have different meanings, and that meaning has changed over time.
But for the purpose of this particular argument, it needed to be a certain length of pages and a certain price point.
Right. Rosenberg wasn't quite done with just this setup. He didn't just want a graphic novel. He wanted to be a number one. The Duke in New York.
Who doesn't want to be the Duke?
Exactly. Well, I mean, if he can make it here. So he hired a guy named Fred Valenti and a few others to create a 144-page graphic novel, which is the minimum, I believe, required by Diamond, based on his Platinum Studios one-sheet and early drafts of a screenplay. Now, while quote-unquote graphic novels are priced between $10 and $15 traditionally, they decided to price the book at $4.99. Because, of course, you're going to buy that. So cheap.
But that automatically disqualifies it as a graphic novel because it's too cheap.
That's right. The problem is Diamond, or Diamond Comics Distribution, their sales chart required a novel be between $9.99 and infinity. And he wanted to be on top of their sales chart. So what he did was do a backdoor deal with Top Cow.
Yeah, it's Silvestri.
Then who is it that did Shadowline?
That's Jim Valentino.
Oh, it was Valentino. It was the right. Oh, because he was the bastard son of the Image Comics Rat Pack. He was the Jackie Jackson of Image Comics.
I don't know who Jackie Jackson is.
He's the 6th Jackson in the Jackson 5, the one that didn't make it.
Oh, that would explain that.
Mm-hmm. He's the Zeppo of the Three Stooges.
Made a hell of a lighter, though.
Sure, it's with an E. Whatever. So,
you're with an E.
So at the time, Top Cow, which was this part of the splinter group that had started to fracture immediately after Image was founded, but at the time was still being published by Image. So Top Cow was to list the graphic novel alongside their books in Diamond's catalog. Now, the reason for this was because Image was one of the 4 major publishing companies of Diamond who were allowed to alter the terms of their own deal. They were actually able to redefine what constituted a graphic novel, but only if published by them. DC and Marvel were to the others. I don't know what the other one was, but it was probably Dark Horse.
Yeah, I would assume Dark Horse. That's your big 4.
Yeah, those are your main 4. Yeah. You've got the NFL, NBA, MLB.
And a rollerball.
Mm-hmm. Just in case this didn't work, Rosenberg contacted a number of big-time comic book retailers secretly under the table on the East and West Coasts, and I'm sure in Chicago, and offered them a deal to write them a check himself to cover the cost of ordering 5 figures worth of graphic novels for their stores.
Which, if you didn't know, this is completely unheard of.
It is. And also illegal. Because retailers were encouraged through an incentive program offered by Rosenberg to order large numbers of copies of Cowboys and Aliens, but the Diamond pre-order had to be around 15,000.
It's an insane amount.
Even for now, that's a crazy, crazy number. That's X-Men #1 numbers.
Yeah, which is still the biggest selling comic of all time.
But for no reason. It's worthless. It's absolutely worthless because there are so many of them.
If you're trying to collect it, yeah. But I mean, as
if
a comic,
you want all 5, you want all 5 covers?
You need all 5 covers. Otherwise, you're not going to get the whole picture.
It's still not 15,000 copies worth. Well, I'm sure that was way more than just 15,000. But anyway.
Yeah. I think it's 1 million, if I remember.
Oh, God. Yeah. Yeah. It was a lot. It was a lot. So they did it. Most of them went for it. Unlike with DC and Marvel, where they buy back or have retailers return extra copies, they just threw them away in the dumpster. Because all of those not being returned.
And generally, you can't return most comics, especially not graphic novels.
No, especially not graphic novels. But single issues, sometimes they want you to either destroy them or return them.
It is rare, though. That's one thing that non-comic people don't often get, is that once a comic shop buys comics, they have that comic. We can't send it back. So if you say you don't want it, well, that screws us.
And if a company ever asks for you to return them, to like rip the covers off and return them, it's because they want to know how much they overprinted and make sure that not having those other issues that now aren't worth anything because they didn't sell. They want to have those so that the ones that do exist that had been bought increase in value. So, which is a scam in and of itself, but that's just the nature of capitalism.
Yeah.
Scamming.
Well, yeah, but I've never. I'll be honest. I mean, if I'm going to go off on a tangent here, I've never really understood that. I mean, once, say DC, once it is out of their hands, they are not getting any more money from it. What do they care? Why would they care? I hate it. I hate it. when they underprint something, they run out of it. A comic that should be $4 is now selling for $50. They are not seeing dime one of that. And then the people who want to read it, that they could give money to DC, they're not able to give money to DC because none of them are out there. It's just, and I mean, even if it was, DC isn't, it's all secondary sellers. So it seems completely asinine for a company not to make enough copies of something that people want.
Okay, well, I think that's a 2-point thing. One is that everybody learned their lessons from X-Men #1. They didn't learn the right lesson, but they thought they learned a lesson. And 2, it's the McRib mentality, where they take this thing that's not very good, that is basically just what you got in school lunch, and they make it scarce so that the next time something like that comes around, people are like champing at the bit for it.
Yeah, the problem with that analogy is this is if McRib was being bought up and sold by Wendy's, and Wendy's was getting all of that money, but McDonald's isn't getting any more of it because they aren't making more McRib. Because this happens again and again and again and again.
Well, I mean, but it still works because every McDonald's franchise is owned by an individual person who's trying to sell to cover their overhead. It's kind of a pyramid scheme. Capitalism is a pyramid scheme. It just is by nature.
That's why they put that pyramid on the dollar, my friend.
Consolidating power and market share is the only reason they exist to this point. But no, it's a terrible system, and it in itself is a scam. But gaming that system didn't make it more fair. It made it less equitable, and all it did was hurt the middleman, which were the comic book stores. They've always been the pawns of giant corporations moving money around.
Yeah. I mean, it's just just this particular thing of inflated scarcity. It hurts the people making the comic, the creators making the comic, the people publishing the comic, the people buying the comic, the store selling the comic. The only person that helps is the few people who bought the comic and then are reselling it. And none of that money is going back to any of those other parties.
Right.
Which makes it an insane thing to keep doing again and again.
And that's just part and parcel of the way capitalism works in America. The only way that only a certain number of people benefit, everyone else is screwed, and you don't do it through any legitimate means. It's all either a scam or it's a scam. That's the real. I mean, you either get you're either super lucky or you scammed somebody. That's it.
The odd thing about this particular instance is that usually it's the giant corporation that is skimming all that money off the top. And in this particular case, they're getting screwed just like everybody else except for the secondary seller. And they're just screwing themselves. And it just doesn't make any sense.
In their eyes, and in the parent corporations that owned those publishers, which are, at this point, Marvel wasn't owned by anybody else, I don't think. I think it was just still Marvel.
I mean, at
DC
this
was owned
time,
by
yes.
Warner Brothers.
Yes.
You know, to the higher ups. In this kind of economy works as fiat money and none of it's real. It's all about stocks and shares and you know, made up stuff that has no intrinsic value.
Right. The whole idea that you short print a Batman #2 is that when Batman #2 sells out, did you see we sold out Batman #2? It's such a big deal. How exciting is that?
So then their stocks go up. They hope they can flip it into movies, which they see, you know, gross from that, or TV shows or toys or video games or whatever. But it has nothing to do with the actual intellectual property. And it's a real shame because the only reason that comic books have any intrinsic value is because of their nostalgic value and their rarity, you know? Like there's a reason that I would say Comics #1 will sell for $5 million at Sotheby's, and that's because it's rare and it's important, which is really all value is. It's either scarce or it's useful. And in this situation, it's just scarce.
Mm-hmm.
So what they're trying to do is create artificial scarcity. Well, in this specific situation, they're trying to overinflate demand and limit supply.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get it. It just still just doesn't ever make any sense.
No. I'm with you. That wasn't as much for you as it was for people listening to this. I mean, I know you get it. You work at a comic book store. I know you get it. So, okay, let's get back to this.
Wait, what are we talking about?
Pokemon, isn't it? I think is it Flash Gordon? Delta Burke. It was Delta Burke.
You got to catch them all in space. Also, just to make a point, X-Men #1 sold over 8 million copies.
Jesus Christ.
Just to put that in context, the next highest selling comic of all time was Jason Aaron's Star Wars #1 in 2015.
Wow.
And that sold 1 million copies.
Jesus Christ. That's right there why the industry collapsed. Because everybody started overprinting with variant covers and holograms and foil covers. The stupidest one, and we will talk about this again in a different
stupidest one.
Stupidest one was, I can't remember what company it was. It was a sort of an indie publisher. They produced a comic book cover that was printed on Tyvek. And for those of you who don't know, Tyvek is the weird fireproof, nearly indestructible paper that they put around housing construction after you've put on insulation to cover that before you put on the wall, the drywall. Why would anyone give a shit about that? Why would that matter in the least? Why is that valuable?
So you would be thinking of Continuity Comics Death Watch 2000.
That is 100% correct, yes. Which sounds like a Roger Corman joint.
Yeah, they did Tyvek covers for a lot of their books.
What does that matter? Why does anyone care about that?
It was just another gimmick. That's all it was.
That's all. That whole era was just gimmicks. You remember do you remember the white embossed Fantastic Four with Human Torch on the cover?
I literally sold that this past weekend.
Are you serious?
Serious.
Wow, that's great.
No, that's not great. That's not a great thing. No,
it's not. It's bad. It's bad. We were talking about older comics like Golden Age and Silver Age comics where mothers and grandmothers are throwing away their kids or grandkids' comic book collections when they get older because they don't think they're worth anything and they think they're for kids. Mm-hmm. And that made those issues that remained during that era valuable.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's why you don't see Action Comics #1 or Detective 27 or Amazing Fantasy 15 very often. Making a book printed with a Tyvek cover, which is designed to be indestructible. How would that possibly create a scenario in which there are too few of those to make them the ones that remain valuable? If you can't destroy it, how is it rare down the line? You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, but the idea is if things are never going to be rare again, then you have to make a gimmick to make it seemingly valuable. Well, see, they thought that most of the comics would have been used to line the outside of houses.
Yeah.
So
it was
the
Jimmy
ones
Carter's
that were still available would be read. That's pretty valuable.
Oh man, if I was building a house and I could use those comics to do that exact project, 100% I would.
I know you would.
So would you, but you own a house already, so whatever.
Yeah, maybe if it was a better comic. I don't want those covers out being shown to the world.
Not a big continuity head?
I'm not a continuity stan, as they might say.
After some digging and borderline muckraking by geek journalist Rich Johnston, who actually is, in all fairness, my ex-editor, because I did write for him for a while. When he was with Comic Book Resources, I want to say, when he had his own column called, was it Laying in the Gutter? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
You remember that?
I believe so.
CBR. I think it was CBR.
Mm-hmm.
So he broke this story. Even though I do think he's kind of a tabloid muckraker guy, he does a good job of also not just printing the press releases, like actually doing investigation. He's half TMZ and half Woodward and Bernstein. Which...
Team and Bernsey.
I'd vote for them in 2024.
Maybe they'll actually do something, so please.
Yeah, maybe something will happen. They'll have a bunch of bros, though. All right. So, because of this report, which really only circulated among fanboys and the industry, Diamond caught on, finally, to the scam. And they went back and declared
Dad's not happy.
So they did an audit with their clients. It forced them to disclose the overorders that they were asked to get. So they declared those overorders null and void. And so when the new Diamond sales chart came out, all of a sudden, Cowboys and Aliens went from number 1 with a bullet to 12th place in just graphic novels. You'd think that would have killed the whole thing, right? That should have been the end. But no. Entertainment Weekly decided to report the sales chart of just one store, Midtown Comics, which had, of course, taken the money from Rosenberg. And for that week, made Cowboys and Aliens the best-selling graphic novel of the month. And that was enough. All they had to do was publish the idea that it was the number 1 graphic novel of the month, even though that wasn't completely accurate. It was only accurate for 1 week and then revised, but they published that story anyway. And in May 1997, Universal Pictures and DreamWorks Studios acquired the rights to Cowboys and Aliens, which they described in their press releases as a graphic novel in development. So, now a studio has it. And Universal and DreamWorks hire Steve Odekirk. If you don't know who he is, and you probably shouldn't, he did a movie called Kung Pao.
Yes. Fights a cow.
Which is really all you need to know, because he's kind of living in the house that was perfected by Kung Fu Hustle. So, whatever. It doesn't matter.
Well, he'd done a lot of other funny films.
Yeah, terrible things. Yes, he did a bunch of other stupid
like
shit.
Ace Ventura sequel or the Nutty Professor remakes? What, the Bruce Almighty series?
So they hired Steve Odekirk to write, not Odenkirk, Odekirk, because do not besmirch the name of Bob Odenkirk. Odekirk planned to do this film directly after completing The Nutty Professor 2, The Clumps. Odekirk did like essentially a AMA back in 97. It was called a Prodigy Chat.
Was it all about fire starting and smacking bit?
Could be, yeah.
How to date yourself without dating yourself.
Essentially, it was an AMA. And so people were talking about him, or talking to him about like Ace Ventura and all that garbage. And so I found a transcript of the conversation, and this is one of the snippets from it. This is a quote from Steve Odekirk, 1997. He says, "My next directorial film is called Cowboys and Aliens, about aliens who crash in the Old West and the cowboys get ahead of the technology. The film is based on a comic book." This was 1997. That comic book came out in 2006.
Well, did we ever think that maybe Steve is actually a time traveler?
Well, that's a good point. I mean, I do see him in all those sepia tone photos.
He's always holding a cell phone, but it's the 1950s.
Yeah, he talks about when he killed Lincoln a lot.
He also goes by John Tidor for some reason.
If I remember right, he did shoot McKinley.
I think he stepped on a butterfly, and that's what killed the...
In 1997, even Odekirk was being told, I don't know if he believed it, but he was being told and was peddling the lie that it was based on a comic book. It was not.
Maybe that it's that cow that told him that. That's why I had to fight him later on.
Oh, that top cow?
I see what you did there. You took one thing and another thing, and you married him. They kissed.
It's called animal husbandry. Yes. And so it got to the point where he had written a treatment for it, was going to direct it, and he had hired a production artist as well, named Rolf Moore. Now, I tracked down an interview that Rolf Moore had done where they ask him about why the movie never happened. He had an interesting theory that I had never heard before. He believes that Cowboys and Aliens was actually by a man named Tom Arvis, who had written and drawn a 15-page black and white ashcan that he self-published in 1995. This is a quote. "My impression is that it was only very loosely inspired by the comic. It had some of the characters, alien hover vehicles, etc., but I don't know how close it was other than that." And so I tracked down an interview with Tom Arvis. So this is from Tom Arvis. "Cowboys and Aliens was the original name of the first comic book I self-published in 1995. It was only a 16-page black and white ashcan, which I wrote, drew, Xeroxed, and stapled together myself, and sold nearly 100 copies at the 1995 Small Press Expo in Bethesda, Maryland."
100 copies. Oh my God.
I can't even imagine a number that big. He goes on to say, "I had an offer to publish the book as a full-sized black and white from another publisher and attendee. But by the time we were ready to publish, the bottom had fallen out of the black and white independent comic book glut of the time, and there were no longer the funds. So I shelved the comic, even though I had written 6 issues and drawn 2, and moved on to other ideas. Until 1998, when I posted a colorized version of the ashcan's cover on my website, www.arvtune.com, with the intention of republishing the book myself, full-sized and in color, based on the then burgeoning on-demand and online inexpensive comic printing business." So this guy actually put a book out called Cowboys and Aliens that the production designer for the original production of this believed it was taken from.
Huh.
So there's something to that.
That's wild.
Exactly. I was very surprised by this too.
Why do they feel the need to keep stealing things for this such a dumb idea that turned into a dumb book and a dumb movie?
Exactly. Why did he have to pitch it as a comic book first and go through all through the steps of legally defrauding people? What was the point of that?
It's beyond me, man. I'm on that Tom Arvis website.
Yeah.
Not
great, huh?
I mean, it's all about, hey, I'll teach you how to draw, and I'll draw things for you. And he has this character named Polly Pencil, who is there, like, walking you through.
You mean like Clippy?
Yes, exactly like Clippy.
Oh, that's good. I hope he copyrighted Clippy, too.
Please go to court over Clippy and Polly Pencil.
Wouldn't you be a little suspicious if you're working on this film and they hand you a different comic book?
Certainly is fishy at the very least.
Yeah, you can fill in some blanks here.
Yeah, a lot of this math problem doesn't add up.
No, there's some red flags here.
And more metaphors.
And also mixed metaphors.
Some wonky analogies. We'll throw those in as well.
You can fill in enough blanks. It's not a huge leap in logic here.
No, I mean, this puzzle that we have only scattered pieces of, it creates a visage of a bullshit artist spouting bullshit constantly.
Now, Platinum Studios was still trying to adapt other Malibu properties into film and television. Strangely, they did. There was a Nightman TV show in syndication that existed.
Yeah, he fought the Dark Man.
If you don't know what the premise of Nightman is, so Nightman is a white dude with long hair that looks like he belongs on a romance novel cover, who gets into a car accident and has a piece of shrapnel from the wreck lodged between the 2 hemispheres of his brain, and for some reason that gives him superpowers. Even though I think he's blind,
makes sense to me,
or at least light sensitive. I think is the thing. That's why he only fights at night.
Yeah, he had like some red cyber
he had those red goggles,
the
sort of reverse Summers goggles, where he can only see because of them. So, yeah. And during the day, he was a saxophonist in a jazz band.
A saxophonist is what he was.
That's exactly right. The Panty Droppers.
It's my favorite band.
And this was a real TV show. Look it up. It's not good.
Yeah, look it up. Don't watch it, but look it up.
It's somewhere between, quality-wise, The Cape and Mantis.
The Cape? Oh God, the cape.
That NBC one where the cape gave them superpowers?
Yeah.
It lasted for like, I don't know, 8 episodes or whatever.
I forgot about that.
They make fun of it on Community all the time. Well, they used to.
Huh. I don't even know if I actually saw it. I remember the trailers for it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's NBC for you. I mean, it's by the time you see the trailer, the show's already been canceled. Like that stupid show La Brea. God damn it. I can't believe that's a show.
I'm gonna watch the first episode of La Brea. Yeah, no, I'll let you know.
I work at an NBC station, and that's a promo they run every like 4 minutes.
Oh, I think it looks goddamn ridiculous, which is why I want to check it out. You can go 2 ways. You can completely divert attention from that and try to stay on the straight and narrow, or you can lean into it and make some sweet, sweet money off of it.
Now we're back to our premise for the day. So, Rosenberg joined the Cowboys and Aliens project as a producer. By 1998, Odenkirk had left the project to pursue the remake of the 1964 film with Don Knotts, The Incredible Mr. Limpet, this time starring Jim Carrey. Do you remember this happening?
It didn't happen, no.
But that he would rather do that, a movie that would never come out, than direct Cowboys and Aliens. And there's a good reason why.
Well, I mean, it's Hollywood. There's a lot of, there are truly a lot of comings and goings. A lot of people attached to things, leave things, timing issues, money issues, studio rights issues. It's a smorgasbord of things that can bring you to and fro a project.
And this had them all.
That is 100% true.
Yes. So by 2004, the film rights were acquired by Columbia Pictures because it was obvious that Universal and DreamWorks wasn't going to make it. But then Columbia never moved the project beyond development. So in 2006, Rosenberg finally published Cowboys and Aliens as a graphic novel.
Better late than never.
Well, the funny thing is, I remember this because I was working in a comic book shop during this time when this came out. When they released it, they marketed it as a reprint of an older property. So even here they were trying to run a scam where they were saying back in the day, they had released all the teases and, there was the whole diamond thing, but that book wasn't a real book. So when they re-released it in 2006, they released it as a remake of the Lost Classic, even though that was the book. That was it.
Hey, if you're going to hustle, you got to continue that hustle all the way till the end.
Well, so it was a hit. It actually worked in 2006, sold well, and the following year, Universal and DreamWorks got back together to adapt Cowboys and Aliens into a film. In June 2008, Robert Downey Jr. entered negotiations to star in the film as the main character, Zeke Jackson, a former Union Army gunslinger. Now, while Robert Downey Jr. was making Iron Man 2, he told Jon Favreau about Cowboys and Aliens. Favreau looked into it, and in September 2009, he joined as director. Downey left the project in January 2010 to star in Sherlock Holmes: A Game of Shadows, which, sadly, is a good decision in retrospect.
100%.
And then he was replaced by Daniel Craig. And then in April 2010, Harrison Ford was cast as one of the antagonists. So, here's where it gets bad. In 2009...
Here's where it gets bad?
Oh, this is just a nonstop parade of garbage. In 2009, a new draft of the script was ordered, written by Alex Kurtzman, Roberto Orci, and Damon Lindelof. Mm-hmm. So you have the guys responsible for the Transformers franchise, and Lost, and Prometheus, and the remake of Hawaii Five-0. And so Lindelof is the guy that everyone secretly thinks is a good writer. So when a project is floundering and they need to rewrite, they call in Damon Lindelof a lot of times. The reason they like him is because they take movies that are in development hell. He writes a draft that studios like, and then they make the film. Unfortunately, that's what gave us Prometheus. That's what gave us a completely reworked World War Z.
Yeah, that's true. But on the plus side, if he is given the reins to his own TV show, sometimes you get some gold. The Leftovers.
Leftovers is good. Yes.
Watchmen.
Watchmen is actually way better than it has any right to be. It's actually a very good show. And I hate that it is, but it is. We all hate ourselves for it.
I mean, it's the same with Roberto Orci and Alex Kurtzman, is that, yes, they do give us garbage like Amazing Spider-Man 2,
Mm-hmm.
The Transformers films, but
Mm-hmm.
they, for better or for worse, they restarted Star Trek.
I know, and Alex Kurtzman is now the new Roddenberry, Rick Berman showrunner of all of the Star Trek franchise, and it is for the worst. I hate to break it to everybody. As a Trekker myself, I am heartbroken by this. The only good thing to come out of this entire thing has been Lower Decks, which is fantastic.
Yeah, it's quite fun.
Give it a chance. The first few episodes, meh, but it finally builds into a really good show. Season 2 is great. But other than that, that's where you get Discovery, which I still don't know what the that show is. And it's had like 15 showrunners and every season, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't make any sense. So that's what you're dealing with. These are the masterminds put in charge of this film. Kurtzman said, quote, "We need to make sure that, no pun intended, we tipped a hat to the iconography of Harrison Ford and also presented the audience with a very different version." He's, of course, referring to Indiana Jones. When asked how the film was developing, Rosenberg stated, and this is ballsy, quote, "It's incredible. Sometimes it's like seeing exactly what was going through my head when I first had that spark in my head as a kid." Jon Favreau's bringing his own talent and vision to the adaptation, but at the same time, it remains true to what I was really going to get at in the original story. So he's saying that this bullshit one sheet that he created based on other people's ideas and then reworked by other people just a few years before, he had thought up when he was a child. The fucking brass balls on this asshole.
Well, it's not surprising.
This is him in a nutshell.
Oh, yeah.
And,
yeah, this is what he does.
San Diego Comic-Con in July 2010, a panel that I attended, and I'm pretty sure you did. I think we talked about this last time.
Yes. Yeah.
The
last time that no one will hear.
Right. So there was a Cowboys and Aliens panel where Favreau and Harrison Ford and Daniel Craig were all there. While we were waiting, we were in Hall H. While we were waiting for the thing to start, the first and only incident of violence at Comic-Con occurred because two guys fought over a seat. One guy had sat down, and if you know anything about Hall H, you have to claim your seat, and then everybody inevitably has to pee because you were just standing in a line for 72 hours. Went to the bathroom, came back, and someone else was sitting in his seat. He didn't like that, so they got into a fight, and he stabbed the guy through the eye with a pencil.
With a pencil.
And it had to be a pencil. The one he wrote all of his DM notes on with,
What if we just didn't know, but that guy was actually John Wick?
Because then the rest of that day would have been way more interesting. So that delayed the beginning of the panel. And so when the panel finally started, Jon Favreau came out and everyone else came out except Harrison Ford, who had heard about the incident, thought it was funny, and then decided to have the actual security people at Comic-Con drag him out in handcuffs, implying that he was the guy that had committed the thing. Which I'm sure the guy who got stabbed in the eye thought was really funny. I'm sure that was really great for him. And that was the first time Harrison Ford had ever been to Comic-Con. And even he said it was crazy that there were that many people there. And that was before it is like it is today. So
yeah, it's so much worse now.
It is way crazier now. I mean, you essentially have to win the lottery just to get into Hall H. Favreau admitted that he was worried about getting a gig again and he said he was lucky that Iron Man worked, but Iron Man 2 didn't.
This is true.
And he, in that panel, lamented that you only get a certain number of fails before you're nobody. I wish someone had told that to Robert Zemeckis, but that's usually the case. Or Roland Emmerich or M. Night Shyamalan. That would have been nice if they had been told this, but it was kind of sad because he was like, boy, I really hope this movie works. Guess what? On opening day of Cowboys and Aliens, estimates showed that its opening day gross was $13 million.
Whoo, hot damn.
It came in second place to the Smurfs.
Get a rope.
Which opened with the first day gross of $13.3 million.
Well, when you're up against the Blue Man Group, how can you win out the day?
The film gross total about $100 million in the U.S. and Canada. and 74 million internationally, bringing its worldwide total to $174,822,325. The movie cost more than that.
It just barely made its money back, just barely. But not if you count in advertising and all of that. It probably didn't. But I believe the budget was $163 million.
I was going to guess 150. So yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Back then that was a big deal. Now it's kind of standard for that kind of film. But back then it was like, I remember when Superman Returns came out and it made $300 million worldwide, and everybody's like, boy, that was a disaster because it cost $200+ million to make.
Yeah.
Cowboys and Aliens received mixed reviews. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film got an approval rating around 44%. The average rating of about 5.5 out of 10.
Which is fairly shocking, having seen the film more than once.
That it got that good a rating?
Yes, that it got that good of a rating. I mean, the movie has nothing going for it. I mean, it has stuff going for it. It has nothing there to enjoy.
Isn't that the perfect metaphor for this property in general? There was never anything there. It's vaporware, the IP. The comic wasn't made until well after the fact, and only as a concession so he didn't get sued. On Metacritic, the film has a score of 50 out of 100, indicating, quote, mixed or average reviews. I don't think you can get more mixed or average than 50 out of 100.
Walking straight down that line.
So, famous producer Brian Grazer from DreamWorks is perfectly aware that Cowboys and Aliens sucks. According to an interview he did with The Atlantic, Grazer admitted that he had a few, quote, mulligans in his life. I don't like Cowboys or Aliens, Grazer said at the Aspen Ideas Festival. Quote, I remember having this one meeting, an early meeting, and they were talking about the title, Cowboys and Aliens. And I said, we aren't really going to call it that, are we? And the others said, yeah, of course we are. And I said, I don't get this at all.
The smart guy in the room.
Still, Cowboys and Aliens took the top spot at the box office with $36 million that weekend in July 2011. But they still were below expectations. They were hoping for 45. But Grazer, when he was asked about those numbers, he said, quote, every once in a while, I rationalize quality. There are so many decisions you make, and you're trying to do excellence. We know what excellence is. We know what better food is versus not good food. What a poet. But there's a rationalizing process. That's good enough. Anytime the light bulb goes, that's good enough. It's shit. What is he even saying there? He's saying he's fine with crapping out mediocre work and also knowing that it sucks.
Yeah. Or at least the shitty thing came about, and it is what it is at that point, and he kind of washes his hands of.
Yep. So the whole thing is kind of a scam. The whole thing is, there's no substance to any of this on so many levels, metaphorically and literally. And somehow it turned into a movie. Thankfully, it didn't really take off, and nobody really remembers it now. Stephen John Boosty filed a suit in U.S. District Court in Texas on Wednesday. What year was that?
December 2011.
Against Universal DreamWorks and Platinum Studios, and especially Scott Mitchell Rosenberg. Boosty says he published a preview of his story similar to the premise of Cowboys and Aliens in 1994, but
Well, not just similar. It's the same name. Yeah, no, he said he published Cowboys and Aliens 9-page comic in 1995, and that Rosenberg and the rest of his cohorts had stolen his intellectual property, and he demanded all the money that was due to him. Essentially, his argument was, yeah, he doesn't own Cowboys. Yeah, he doesn't really own Aliens either. But if you put those two together, that's his spot, baby.
And you knew this was coming. Because even if this is bullshit, you wouldn't be surprised if they just stole it from somebody. I mean, that's par for the course for this whole scam, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and whether they did or didn't, I really don't know. And unfortunately, the way that the suit kind of played out, it doesn't really matter.
Right. Well, even if he had won, it doesn't matter, because remember when that woman who had produced that book that later got ripped off and became The Village, M. Night Shyamalan's The Village,
Right.
she won that lawsuit, and still nobody even knows that was a thing.
Yeah. It's like putting out a sensationalistic headline, but then doing a retraction, a week later.
On page 6?
It doesn't matter. Yeah. It's posting BS about the coronavirus or something.
Mm-hmm.
It gets out there. It's the headline everyone reads, even though it's fact-checked long after. The people only know the falsity because that's what got the clicks.
Yeah, you're talking about the Richard Jewell scenario, where everybody ran with it because that was the first thing they heard. It had no basis in reality.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes facts get in the way of a good story.
Exactly. To tie it into that Excalibur episode. So Boosty says that he published a preview of his story in 1994, and it followed with the actual Cowboys and Aliens story in January of 1995 in an issue of Bizarre Fantasy #1. But the thing is, he didn't register with the Copyright Office for this magazine that he self-published until September 2011. Even if they did steal your shit, you don't have anything to back yourself up legally. And it's such a vague idea that you don't have a leg to stand on here.
Yeah, the real problem with his particular lawsuit is that it's essentially a high concept project. It makes for a weak copyright claim. High concepts tend to work. They draw their potency and drawability from big picture, easily explainable concepts, and then you don't really deal with the particularities there. It's just these big things, like spaceman and prostitute, Spaceman, prostitute. There you go. It doesn't really matter the details of the character or the story. It's just an explainable idea that you can get across to the consumer.
The sad part is that he did have kind of a point to a certain level. He alleged that in 2 years after he wrote that, Rosenberg and Platinum produced a one-sheet featuring a cowboy being chased by an alien in a promotional effort led to Universal and DreamWorks buying film rights, and Platinum then producing a graphic novel in 2006 that looked a lot like the work he had already done. That's fair. And further, in the complaint, it says that the Cowboys and Aliens graphic novel contains striking similarities to the plaintiff's copyrighted Cowboys and Aliens work, including an alien spaceship zooming overhead, the main cowboy, which that's not a strong case for that. But in the narrative, the spacecraft is discovered by Apache warriors who are then attacked by the aliens. That happens in the comic. They change it for the movie, but it happens in the comic and in this guy's story. That's a little specific. I mean, it could be a coincidence, but that's a hell of a coincidence.
It's true, but when an artist's creative work could be fairly reduced to the formula X plus Y, it's so much more likely that someone else has already developed independently that same idea, and it's very hard to prove the protection for that particular intellectual property based on that.
It's fair.
But you can get into the specifics, which the lawyers for the defendant,
Boosty.
the lawyers for Universal, Platinum Studios, and DreamWorks and Rosenberg, they kind of just attacked in court these claims.
So the ones with money.
Yeah, quote, "Not only did we not copy his comic, nobody would have, because it's just too terrible."
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
That's a ballsy thing to say, considering they based it on a thing that didn't exist. A scam. They didn't copy it because they didn't produce anything. That guy actually made something.
They're nothing if not ballsy all the way around, and they've got the money to back it up.
Jeez, yep. So what a great system we have here.
So these lawyers, they actually put out these details of Boosty's story. The self-published story involved a generic cowboy character, 2 generic Native American characters, and a giant alien monster named Morgu, who recently arrived on Earth from the Voltan Empire in a classic round UFO disc, the most cliche of spaceships.
Well, and Voltan, I mean, once again, how many full circles do we have to have? And we didn't do this on purpose.
Hey, it just comes upon us in a flash.
It sure does.
In the comic, which is only 9 pages long, the alien spaceship is discovered by both the cowboy and the Native Americans, both of whom, after their respective brief struggles with the alien, set off to make plans to protect their respective people and or defend against the alien. The story ends as they set off their respective missions to protect their people. That is the end of the comic, and there were no future works. So really kind of digging in that, well, that guy didn't do anything more, so does it really matter?
But the problem is that even if it was true and they did rip him off, that guy had no chance. He had no shot in hell. And he just got screwed, while a guy who made literally nothing ever, it built all this on the backs of other people, he wins and makes all this money on a failure. And the guy that might have come up with an idea that ended up becoming this thing that made a lot of money gets diddly squat.
Yep. Boosty is pretty much in the wind, while Mr. Rosenberg continues to produce comics, live action feature films, television series, electronic comics, animated panels, voiceovers, sound effects, and music for leading record labels like Virgin and Hollywood Records.
Jesus Christ. He's just scamming everywhere he can.
Oh, yeah. Hey, a grifter's gonna grift for life, man.
Stan Lee. You know, he just shows up, puts his name on stuff, and then claims that it's his. As part of the deal, one of his stipulations for selling Malibu to Marvel was that he got to call himself a senior executive vice president of Marvel Comics.
Swinging dick, my friend.
You know for a fact, he had nothing to do with anything at Marvel. They just were like, you get to call yourself this on your Wikipedia. The end.
The rich get richer, man.
Yeah, exactly. For no work.
Yep.
He just stole from everyone and profited off of all of it, even the stuff that failed.
Allegedly.
Boosty's lawsuit was thrown out of court.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't really have a good legal argument, and he was kind of too late to bring it anyway.
Yep, it's true. But, I mean, even if he were completely 100% right, he was never going to see justice for that.
Nope, not a chance.
And so is the world in which we live. So
ends the story of Cowboys and Aliens, never versus.
Yeah, that kind of sums it up.
Yep, that is comic books in Hollywood for us.
We're not cynical. That's just what's happened so far. And there is great stuff out there. There's good indie stuff out there, especially now, more than ever.
Which one might say is due to Image Comics.
In a weird roundabout way, Image changed itself after destroying the industry and being one of the worst publishers in every way. Schedule, infighting, overprinting, overhyping. It somehow turned itself around and became one of the best imprints that are out there. Out-vertigoing Vertigo.
So really, it's because of Scott Mitchell Rosenberg that we have some of the best comic books being made. If you think about it.
Well, that's all she wrote.
So everybody, crack open that wine, get your razors ready, and slit your wrist in the bathtub.
And don't bother reading Cowboys and Aliens or watching the movie.
No, I've done it multiple times, and by far, that has been the worst part of this whole podcast.
That's saying a lot, though. But you know what? If you do, anyone who's listened to this now, you can watch it and smile quietly to yourself that you know a little bit about how wrong the world is.
And squeak toys.
Damn it, Starbuck.
Remember, no matter where you go, there you are.